Awesome. I see some people coming into the webinar right now, which is great.
Great, awesome, welcome everyone. Great. As folks trickle in, if you don't mind just answering this poll question. So ultimately, we are wondering what symptoms you are already experiencing. Caitlin, thank you so much for opening up that poll. If you don't mind just selecting all that apply, that will help us kick off our conversation. All right, see some familiar faces. Hi, everyone. Great. For folks that are just trickling in, if you don't mind just answering this first poll question, it's select all the symptoms that you are experiencing, and you can select as many that apply to you and your organization. So the first option is the super spreadsheets, so the spreadsheet chaos that are hard to maintain. Second option being reports with numbers that don't match up, stale dashboards or reports, lack of confidence or trust in your data, gut-based decision rather than data-driven decision. So if you're experiencing any of those within your organization today, would love for you to weigh in on the poll. And as Caitlin mentioned to the group in the chat, we'll be getting started in just a minute. All right, great. So what we're seeing is it seems like across the board, there are folks that are experiencing a little bit of all of these. So we're having the super spreadsheets that are hard to maintain. We're having the lack of confidence in the, or trust in the data, all of the above. So thank you. That's a helpful pulse check as we get started on this data conversation. Great. So welcome everyone. We're super excited to kick off this conversation on the Fast Dash. And I am Liz Seville. I will be hosting this. I'm a senior solutions consultant here at BrainSell. We'd love to introduce the star of the show, Jordan Berry.
Hey everybody, good afternoon.
And Jordan is a data analyst, architect, all of the above with BrainSell as well. So as we get started, like the Fast Dash, this webinar is also going to be fast and moving quickly. So we're only having 30 minutes together. We want to respect your busy time. And we would just love for you to be dropping in any questions, comments that you have within the chat throughout. So we have one of our marketing team members who is going to be monitoring the chat, and then I will queue up questions at the end for our Q&A. After this, you will receive the recording as well. So just to go over a high-level agenda, we'll start with just telling you a little bit about BrainSell very quickly. Then we'll move into Jordan's component, which will be going over some common data problems and introducing a data dashboard in a case study. Then we'll save about 10 minutes at the end to have some live Q&A for us to discuss any questions that you may have coming out of this presentation. And stick around to the end. We will be offering a promotion as well. All right, so we see in the crowd, there's many of you who are already familiar with BrainSell, but for those who are not, BrainSell is a growth enablement company. So what that means is we help you and your organizations be able to scale in an efficient way with data, technology, and process. So we've been around for about 27 years and help clients across all industries. And I will kick this over to Jordan to start talking about the data component.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that intro, Liz. Really appreciate it, and excited to have everyone here talking about data today. And so really the topic of this is Fast Dash. And so how do you go from the raw material of data, that thing that is so nebulous and yet so important, and turn that into something that's really functional and valuable for your organization? And so one of the themes that we'll talk about a little bit, kind of the background of data and why it's so important, is that we have this thesis that every company is a data company. And so you may or may not know it, you may or may not be using it, but the market is moving this way. People are starting to use data to decide, everything from operational decision making to executive decision making, and everything in between. And so we're bullish on data, and hopefully you'll learn a few things about data today. So one thing we always like to do is kind of talk about, data. You've probably heard about big data and, how much impact that has had over the last decade or so. But what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of that data is being created and consumed more recently than ever. So in the last year or so, this is based on some statistics, there has been 90% of the world's data. And we're talking about trackable, manageable data. So think back to ancient times when we were writing things down in paper and pen and notebook, all the way now to software systems. Because we have, line of business systems in marketing, sales, operations, as well as IoT devices that have sensors and are capturing data, we're generating and being able to leverage the power of data much more than we have in the past. Now, the second statistic, 137, is a little bit more tactical. So this looks at mid-market organizations. So those are companies that have at least 50 employees, up to $500 million in revenue. And this is a study by McKinsey, but they found that on average, companies have over 130 systems that they're using day to day. So this is everything from your marketing tool, your sales tool, your internal operational tools, your creative tools, even some spreadsheets get thrown in there. But there's this wide array of systems that are being used. And so how do you, pull the data from all those systems and unify it in a way that you can make it usable? And it is challenging to become data-driven, but there is an upside. So if you look at that last statistic, 19 times, organizations that make data a core part of their strategy are 19 times more likely to be more profitable. So while it's challenging, while it's hard to set up, there is a value proposition on the other side. And so I know we started the webinar with a survey, kind of the data symptoms that you're experiencing. And it was really interesting to see that, spreadsheet madness was really the top symptom that people are seeing. And really that, if we're kind of the data doctors, those are the symptoms that we start to see. So one is spreadsheet madness. So there's these internal spreadsheets that are used as if they're operational tools, and I'm sure a lot of us have felt that pain where, a formula breaks or the person that set it up leaves the organization. How do you maintain that stability in an organization when it's really run on top of fragile spreadsheets? Oftentimes we'll also see what we often will refer to as integration spaghetti. So this is where you have all these point-to-point integrations between systems. A lot of times this is where developers have the best of intentions, but they create, somewhat of a chaotic atmosphere where data is getting pushed and pulled across different systems, and it becomes really hard as an operator to understand, where is my source of truth, and what data should I rely on. And then finally, if you're a larger organization, you may have the budget, the time, the know-how to invest and build a data team in-house. And while that's a very viable option for some organizations, most of those in the mid-market will struggle with this because A, it's expensive, the talent is really hard to find, it's a really unique skill set. There's another stat that, for every data scientist, which was, one of the coveted roles in the last couple of years, you need 3 or 4 data engineers to support them. So if you really, have to think about, is it worth the investment to build it in-house, or do you look for a partner that has that expertise that can really help you along the way? And so how do we solve this, right? This is complex, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of moving parts. There's this movement around what's called the modern data platform. And so while this is a bit of an architecture diagram, really the idea is that you've got inputs and outputs. So on the left-hand side, you're connecting to things like your raw data systems, your servers, your databases, et cetera. You may have files that come from those spreadsheets or CSVs or whatever the format it's in. And there's also these cloud-based APIs, so all the different systems that you're using. The idea is instead of, connecting them each to each other, flow that into one unified platform. And so you can see in the middle, really that's that symbol is kind of a metaphor for a data lake / data warehouse. So we'll often call it a lake house architecture. And so you flow that data into one place so that you can really get control and understanding of what all that data is. And then on the right-hand side, that's what really, as a business user, you care about. So I want to understand, how can I quickly surface that data through a dashboard? Or maybe I'm focused on being really proactive with my customers. So I want to build predictive analytics via artificial intelligence and machine learning. Or maybe I want to surface that data operationally. We have a lot of customers that, they want to empower their salespeople with as much information as possible. So data on, tickets and cases, the problems that my customers are having. How do I surface that to salespeople? The preferences of our customer that we're tracking in our marketing tools. I want to give those to my salespeople as well, but they don't want to necessarily log into a bunch of different systems. So this architecture really supports all of those outputs that are key to becoming a data-driven organization. And so the way this looks like, that was an architecture diagram, a little bit more about the plumbing, we like to call it. This is really how it starts to surface. So it's everything from being able to connect to those systems in a self-service way, monitoring your data pipelines so that you can really quickly understand what's happening with that data. And finally, that bottom chart in the bottom right is really what a lot of our organizations care about is, hey, I want that dashboard and I want it up to date every day. I want to be able to go in there and rely on it to run my organization. And so what we really focus on is the Fast Dash initiative. And so the idea of Fast Dash is really that, in weeks, not months, we can go from raw data to insights in a dashboard. And so here's that output. So like I said, we're probably not going to talk too much about the process of Fast Dash, but just like we showed in the diagram, we want to talk about the outputs. So this was an organization. We're going to do some kind of what we call solution briefs, so kind of talking about organizations and the power they've been able to harness with dashboards. This is a very unique one. So you can see we're focused on pipeline, which is really kind of a sales-oriented dashboard. What was unique is for this organization, they had multiple CRM tools. Kind of amazes me that happens, but sometimes organizations will invest in different tools for different systems. Through M&A, things will come together. And so by using this Fast Dash approach, we were able to combine the data from multiple CRMs. We were able to input data from third-party tools, and now they can log into one simple dashboard and manage their entire pipeline across different divisions within the organization. On top of that, one of the really powerful things that we can do with Fast Dash is we can create snapshotting. So this allows us to take essentially a picture of the data, on a cadence. So whether that's hourly, daily, monthly, we do a quick snapshot of the data, and then you can do all kinds of trending analysis, forecasting. You can look at what's changing over time. Traditionally, that's been really challenging from a technical standpoint and expensive. And because of the revolutionary changes in, cloud architecture, that's a very inexpensive thing to do now. And so we're seeing a lot of success with customers that are starting to leverage that capability. One of the other things you can do with dashboards is you can start to kind of think more globally, more broadly. So whether you're tracking KPIs across organizations, across departments, really the idea is how do you switch your thinking from looking in the rearview mirror of what happened last week, what happened last month, what happened last quarter, to now having that near real-time view where you're looking at different parts of the organization, or in this case, we were looking at kind of a private equity firm where they're looking at literally different organizations in one view and being able to see, what is happening in that organization. And the idea is that this makes you much more proactive. It makes you able to dig into the details quicker. All those questions of what's happening and why and where, you can get to the bottom of those data discoveries quite quickly. So again, just another example of the power of leveraging your data in a dashboard format. And so we talked about the output, but let's talk about how that output enabled business performance. And so we've got two case studies we like to walk through. The first is a large equipment sales organization. And so really their bread and butter is helping individuals or organizations understand when they need to purchase big equipment. So think construction sites, home renovations, and they need to really target them. So when you need a rental skid steer or a rental backhoe, you know who to go to purchase or rent that vehicle. And so for their challenges, they had multiple systems. They were spending money in advertising, think Facebook ads, Google ads, that type of thing, but they really had no idea how that was impacting their sales down the line. And so in order to link their advertising spend with their sales and ultimately their revenue, they needed to pull all that data together. And so by going through the Fast Dash process, we help them A, set up their data foundation, so all that plumbing to pull the data into one place, and B, we worked with them to design that dashboard in the bottom corner. So over the course of about 6 weeks, we went through this process, and at the very end, we connected 7 systems into one data platform, and they were able to understand that they were actually getting a 14x return on their ad spend. So if you're the CMO and you're struggling to understand, what does my spend actually equate to, something like this could really help create that job security and that understanding of, here's truly what's happening in our organization. And what I love about data is that it's really horizontal. So different industry, different use case, same patterns and practices, creating similar results. And so this was a healthcare newspaper organization. So they actually have a national distribution of their newspaper. And one of the big things they focus on is really kind of the premium subscriber. So Think, Disney Plus or Hulu, where you subscribe to the added content and the no ads and that kind of next tier level of subscription. And it's a bit of a tricky story, but for them, they wanted to understand, who are our top customers, who are our VIPs, who just subscribe to our premium offering, who unsubscribe to our premium offering, probably the things we do every day with Netflix and other organizations. And the challenge they had was that they really didn't have confidence in their data. So they would look at a list, they'd send an email newsletter saying, hey, we saw you just unsubscribed. Can we bring you back with a discount? They'd get all this pushback from their customers saying, I didn't unsubscribe. I'm one of your best customers. I read this every Sunday with my coffee. And so they really just, were sending the wrong message to the wrong person. And this was really the, crucial to their business to be able to grow and focus on their strategic goals. So what they did with us is, again, set up the data foundation, designed a dashboard, and now they're able to not only see some insights through a dashboard, but they're actually segmenting their customers in a way that they can push that to their marketing tools and actually send out emails, really quickly and at that, precision that they need to in order to succeed. So again, this is where data gets me so excited, because you can take it in so many different directions and it can really help the business.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan. Folks, if you do have any additional questions, feel free to continue to drop them in the chat. I'll get started with some that are already in there. Jordan, would you mind telling us what is the difference between this data lakehouse versus a data warehouse like a Snowflake or a BI tool like a Power BI or Tableau?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, a lot of times we'll hear this term called data stack that is being thrown around. So much like your marketing stack or your sales stack, organizations are start to build their data stack. And so there's a lot of tools that go into play in terms of harnessing that data, collecting it. And so, I don't know if you guys have seen, and maybe we can send this out afterwards, but there's kind of those diagrams of the MarTech tools, and there's thousands of tools that all come into play. Data is starting to grow where there's, 50, 100, 200, 500 tools are starting to enter the space. And so really I break it down into a couple different parts. The first is really how do you connect and ingest your data? And so those are tools, like Fivetran and others. Then there's how do you store your data? And so that's where companies like Snowflake and others come in. And there's, much like other operational systems, there's some philosophies around that. So we like to talk about kind of a data lake house. So it's kind of part data lake, part data warehouse. Some organizations opt to go just with the lake, some opt to go just with the house. We think there's kind of that, Goldilocks situation that you can combine the two. And then on the outside, there are those BI tools, so things like Power BI, ClickView, Looker, Tableau, et cetera. And so it's really the combination of those things that make this really powerful.
Great, thank you. And for some of those examples and case studies that you walked through, how quickly would those be able to get developed?
Yeah, so we like to use the phrase kind of in weeks, not months. So the idea is that it's really quick. So we have our proven fast dash process. So the first thing we do is we go through a quick discovery, understand what are your pain points, what are we trying to solve? Then we kind of go on two parallel paths. So one is setting up that data foundation, getting the plumbing in place, getting the data flowing. The second is really that dashboard design. So we have our analysts and designers sit with you and really go through a prototyping and mock-up process. And then those two work streams come together at the end, usually around week 5 or 6. And that's where kind of the magic happens. So you've got real-time data flowing into the dashboard. And at that point, you should be able to use it operationally for the next 12 to 24 months to run your business. So that's kind of the idea. It's a really compressed timeline, solving a really challenging piece of your process. But the idea is that it kind of comes together in a really spectacular way.
That's awesome. Great, thank you. And you had mentioned folks maybe not having confidence in their data. What is your recommendation on a first step to build confidence in data?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of those things where, strategy eats, process, for breakfast kind of thing. So if you've got your strategy, but you don't have that process, you don't have that data, it's gonna be really challenging to be confident in it. So I always like to start with just kind of a data audit, and we've got some resources around this is, where does that data come from? Okay, is it coming directly from the source? Is it getting passed around a couple times before it gets to me? Where could that break in the data confidence come from? And then once you have an understanding of that landscape, then you can start to really peel back the onion of, okay, well, let's maybe not try and tackle all our systems, but let's just focus on one or two. And then we'll add system 3, system 4. So yeah, so back to the original question, I would say just really kind of doing a data audit, a self-assessment. Obviously we have some analysts that have been through this and can assist in that regard if interested, but it's really just kind of taking a look in the mirror and figuring out, are we, where is that breakage happening?
Great, thank you. Folks, just as a reminder, we have about 10 minutes left in this. We have time for a few more questions if folks want to drop it into the chat or into the questions box. I know Caitlin's posting as well. So continuing on some of these questions, Jordan, as far as building confidence, we've discussed that there's a baby step there. As far as who should own data internally, do you have any advice on that, or data governance internally?
Yeah, that's another great question. Usually data governance, I see kind of two practices in play. So usually when we look at an organization, they'll kind of take one of two flavors. So one is the very centralized model. So usually that's kind of an IT-led approach. So they'll, as an organization, we're going to make the decision that we're going to be all in on one particular technology, and we're going to basically make sure that all the departments flow through that one hub. And while in theory that makes a lot of sense, it can, in practice have some challenges. So you're kind of creating a bottleneck in the organization. So you're kind of constantly having to go back to the IT department to get things updated, changed, maintained. And you also just struggle with, that agility and that speed. The other approach we're seeing is kind of some, what I would call kind of data hubs throughout the organization, where the idea is let's unify data in different facets of the business, and then there may be that kind of mothership that you pull all the data into. And so the kind of the combination of that is that you get these departments or groups within the organization that can move really fast and solve problems quickly, but you don't lose that overarching view of the data. So a couple different ways there. The really unique thing about data is that while it's a technical thing to pull the data out of systems and start to use it, the people that get the most impact are the business side. So those that are running the marketing campaigns, the ones that are managing the sales pipeline, the ones that are managing tickets and case management on the support side, they benefit most from data. So I always like to see that there's a couple champions there. One of the terms that we've thrown out recently is, are you data curious? And so usually the heads or the VPs of those functions should be data curious. They need the data. They need to know, how it's working, how it's not working, what do they change? And so really just having that curiosity, upping your data acumen, those are some of the things that are really helpful if you're trying to go on this data-driven journey.
Great. Yeah, I think we're going to need to rebrand BrainSell with data mothership and data doctors. Last question, unless folks post more, but you'd sort of started to allude to this about actually developing and making sure you have the right data points. If you have an organization that maybe doesn't capture the right data points you're looking to be data driven, how do you start getting folks bought into this journey?
Yeah, great question. What I would say would be to start with the end in mind. So if you took all those obstacles out of the way and you had kind of your magical dashboard that you could use every day, if you can start to articulate that, then you can reverse engineer into those kind of challenges and kind of unlocking that potential. So a lot of times with organizations, we'll see, hey, if only I had this dashboard that I could run my day-to-day operations with, that would be the thing that kind of really unlocks value. Once you have that vision in place, then you can kind of back it in. So what I like to say too is that by going through this process, you'll uncover where those weak spots are. So there's so many times where we'll develop a dashboard for organization and we'll get a couple key KPIs that they're starting to use, and that'll spark questions. Oh, now that I can see this, I would love to see this sliced by this, or I would really like to understand, pipeline by product, or if I could start to predict 2 months out, now I can take this proactive action with my team. And so really, to me, I wouldn't let the thought challenge of data prevent you from taking action. Really that first step could be the one that starts to get the ball rolling.
Awesome. So these fast dashes seem iterative. You don't have to have a static KPI metric identified and stick to it forever.
Absolutely. Yeah. The idea is it's quick, it's lightweight, prove the value in weeks, not months. And then at that point, you've got the foundation in place to enhance and expand throughout the organization.
Sounds great. Well, actually, we are an efficient group. It seems like folks have wrapped up questions. So I think unless others chime in, we can move on here. Thank you so much, Jordan. Really appreciate all of the insights here. I'll definitely go back and watch the recording as well. And folks that are still with us, we do have a take-home assessment that will be going out to you after this. And if you do complete that, you'll be able to have a 30-minute specialist meeting with our BrainSell specialist to go over and ultimately work through what data looks like for you and your organization and make some catered recommendations for you and your organization. So if anyone does have any additional questions, we love to talk about data here at BrainSell, if you couldn't tell from this conversation. So please do continue to reach out. And Caitlin, thank you so much for moderating the chat as well. So thank you all. We'll give you back a couple minutes in the spirit of efficiency, but appreciate all of your time today.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.